Sometimes it's a matter of taking up space where you're holding onto too much, and sometimes it's a matter of creating space where you don't have enough. To improve ribcage mobility, you need to be able to move your ribs. That should be pretty obvious. And specifically, you need to be able to access two motions. Those are external rotation or lifting of the ribs, and internal rotation or this downward movement of the ribs. And even when you've applied the framework I covered in another video that looks at the influence of position, as well as breathing, as well as movement of the limbs, sometimes you just can't access these motions of external and internal rotation. Well, in today's video, we're going to cover why that is by going through a very common scenario, which I see quite often. We're going to talk about the influence of movement in other planes and what you can do about it to truly be able to realize the ribcage mobility gains that you want. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So when I see asymmetries in the ribcage, the most common one that I see is going to be a ribcage on the right that is relatively more compressed, often seemingly biasing internal rotation, and then a ribcage on the left that is more expanded and open, seemingly biasing external rotation. And I think you'll see why I'm going to use the word seemingly here and not say this in more of a certain way. Now, for me, this was the case because I played guitar and upright bass. So if you think about it, your hand on the right side is doing this. That's moving everything down. And on the left is doing this, moving everything up. But you're going to see in a second that the nature of this activity and the nature of left rotational activities in general can influence movement within the ribcage that prevents us from being able to capitalize using some of our other frameworks that we presented in that other video, which is in the description or up here somewhere. Okay. So just to review, we're talking about the influence of movement. As we extend, ribs in the back come closer together. Ribs pop up in the front. As we flex down, ribs in the back move further apart, and we come down in the front. Now, when we're talking about this, we're talking about movement front to back, so flexion and extension. But we also have other planes of movement that are going to impact that positioning of the ribs. We have side bend, so watch this right side here. If I side bend down, ribs come closer together. On that right side, they get further apart on the left. And then if I rotate toward the left, you see also ribs getting closer together, going further apart on the left, and we could do the opposite there. So now that you see the influence there, this means that if we bias one of those positions, so left or right rotation, we can influence the behavior of the back of the rib cage such that when we do things that are just straight forward, straight back, we don't quite get the motion because we're already there. So check this out. If I'm in this side bent position and then I try to extend, I can't because I've already taken up that rib cage space. Now, if I rotate to the left and side bend to the right, then I'm really going to have trouble extending because I'm already there. So in order to fix this, we need to reverse engineer. We have an additional step when we're looking at the position part of our framework. We need to adjust not only in the front to back plane, but also rotationally and maybe in this frontal plane as well. Now, just so you can conceptualize this, think about how this looks on an upright bass. Arm comes down, arm comes up. We get frontal plane movement, downward on the right, upward on the left. We get rotational movement towards that left side, both of which are going to compress the back of the right. And then if we want to try to extend there, again, we're already there, okay? So we're just going to reverse engineer this. In this case, I'm going to reach down and forward on that left side, bringing the left shoulder down, rotating the rib cage back to the right. Now, with that right side relatively compressed, I can take my breath in and extend. And now I can have ribs coming up because I've opened up that space. So let's look at this. I rotate to the right and allow that right side to come up. Now I've created space. Now I can move into that space, okay? Now this brings up an important issue though. We've got the positioning down, or so we think. But what I see often is that when people go to extend and expand one side, oftentimes, especially if they have reduced mobility in one area, they'll get increased or excessive mobility in another. And you can see this if you have a trained eye for this, or if you experience it yourself by constraining the movement like I'm going to show you in a second. So if I go to extend here, and I have more movement available at the bottom of the rib cage, sometimes this is what the movement looks like. Okay, I'm exaggerating here, but you can see all the movements happening here versus a more distributed shape with less extension at each segment, right? But an equal amount at each. And that's what we're shooting for here. So specifically, if ribs in the front are tending to be compressed down together, and we want those to open up, then it does us no good just to extend at the lowest segment there at the bottom of the rib cage where we might be fine, right? That's just an example. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that we get this distributed motion rather than motion at one segment. How do we do that? So to do that, we're going to want to move a little bit more, at least initially, from a neutral position first, where we're starting with equal potential at each segment, and then constrain the activity such that we move equally at each segment. So we used the example a second ago of this arching like this at this segment more than the rest. And so a way that we could start to constrain that would be, let's say we're on a table, we're laying on our back. We reach up with the arm. Reach up with the left arm, we side bend a little bit on that side, exhale. Now we can get this right side of the rib cage down towards the table. Okay, so that takes it from sort of this state towards this state. Now with this being the fixed point, we can reach up with that right arm, not losing that contact, and we can get the rest of the ribs to move relative to that, such that we get an equal amount of extension at each segment. So let's go ahead and practice that. So we're going to lay back. We're going to get into a nice comfy position. We're going to take that left side, palm down. I'm going to reach up and exhale. As we do this, we're going to feel the right side at that lower rib cage level coming back into the table. We're going to feel a heaviness there and then keep this as a reference point. Now maintaining that heaviness, we're going to reach up and back with an open palm on that right side. We're going to do this as we take a breath in and just ever so slightly tuck the chin down. As we do this, we're going to feel the ribs expand up and back without losing that reference point. And what that's going to do for us is that's going to allow all those ribs to expand a little bit and extend a little bit at each segment without just arching back at that lowest level. And this is why things like this, like laying on the floor or using a wall for reference, can be super great to make sure we're getting that distributed motion. So now if you're watching this, it's probably starting to make sense, but a question you might have is, well, how do I actually identify what's going on with me specifically? And this is where just trying to figure it out through the lens of concepts and thoughts can really do you wrong. I did this for years and it doesn't work. The way that you need to gain an awareness of this is by feeling it in your body for yourself. If you can't feel it in your body for yourself and you're relying on someone else to tell you what it is, you're doing yourself a disservice in the short term for sure, but definitely in the long term. Because this stuff, it really isn't that complicated once you can feel it. But if you can't feel it, then you're not going to be able to reliably make the adjustment that you need when things inevitably will sometimes get off track, right? We get stressed, we tweak something the wrong way, whatever the reason, we don't get sleep, we sleep a little funny. Our body reverts to these patterns where it's kind of all twisted up. So if we don't have that awareness to understand where and how to move the body on our own, then we're always going to be kind of going back to YouTube, or we're going to be outsourcing that awareness of where we should be to someone else. And that's not a good thing to do long term. So quite simply, what you have to be able to do is you have to learn how to shift your body in all of these planes, side to side, rotationally, front to back. And over time, you're going to gain an awareness for where you create space and where you might be losing space, right? So we need to understand how to both create space and how to take up that space. And sometimes it's a matter of taking up space where you're holding on to too much. And sometimes it's a matter of creating space where you don't have enough. And to truly understand that, the only way you can do that is by going through the process of learning and becoming a movement master, which is exactly what I cover in my programs, Movement Foundations. We have upper body, lower body, and core. Specifically, the ones you'd want to look at for this would be core and upper body, as they're both going to influence the mobility within the rib cage massively. If you can do this and gain this awareness slowly over time with some simple and actionable awareness building drills, you're going to find that you no longer have to outsource that wellness to someone else. You're going to have that awareness and be able to make better decisions about what to do, both from a training perspective as well as just a moving and feeling your best perspective. So go ahead and pick those up, or at the very least, start exploring these movements of rotation and side bend. It'll take your ribcage mobility work to the next level. All right, as always, thanks a lot for watching. And until next time, peace.